I know that when I go to meditate to that kind of quiet, deep, profound place, it's a place of nothingness. But I've realized that that's a place of everythingness. I didn't know this at first as I began to meditate. I just knew that it was a big stress buster for me. As TM promised, that you would get rid of lots of your stress. But that's like the tip of the iceberg.
Hello. This podcast is sponsored by aboutmeditation.com and our free How to Meditate mini course. Learn meditation in 5 easy lessons at aboutmeditation.com.
Welcome to the OneMind Podcast from aboutmeditation.com. My name's Morgan Dix, and I'm your host. On OneMind, we explore different angles on meditation, mindfulness, and health. We interview experts and everyday practitioners to bring you the stories, the science, and the exploration that will help you understand why this ancient practice is more relevant and important today than ever before. Hi everyone, thank you for joining me today. I am so happy to share my interview with my old friend, the incredible Joseph Gifford. Before we get into today's interview, I have a message for you from one of our biggest fans, Athena.
Hi everybody, I am doing this as a favor for Morgan. If you love meditation and you are a fan of this podcast, please leave Morgan a rating and a review.
Where can they do that, Athena?
Please head over to the great kingdom of iTunes and let them know how much you like this show by leaving a rating and review. Don't wait another second. Go now.
Okay, we're good. No need to push the edge here. We're all friends. Okay, so back to today's show. So what's the secret to living for 95 years while showing relatively few signs of slowing down? That's one of the subtexts of this interview today with Joe. Joe is not what you might consider a traditional yogi, but to me, that's totally a formality. To my mind, Joe is the definition of a yogi. If you want one formal textual definition of a yogi, which I pulled from Wikipedia, quote, it's someone who knows that the entire cosmos is situated within his own body. I love that. But what does it mean? Well, this whole interview is the answer to that question. So Joe is a former professional dancer, and these days he teaches actors and orchestra conductors. He started meditating about 42 years ago when he took transcendental meditation, and through different teachers and modalities, he hasn't stopped since. Today, Joe shares some of his secrets to loving life and living with what I would call a great abiding happiness. And in the end of this show, he shares his advice and tips for living a long life. But more than anything, for me, this interview is really about the intangibles, the source of delight and joy that radiates from within Joe's words, the promise and potential of life's mystery that hasn't dimmed or diminished for over 95 years. You need to hear this. I need to hear this. We all need to hear elders like this who express this kind of passion, clarity, energy, and something that goes way beyond optimism. This is really about the surging creative intelligence at the heart of life. I hope you find this conversation as uplifting as I did. And one final note. You'll notice both in the beginning and in the middle of the show, Joe's audio goes a little funky. So don't worry about it. It's just a very brief interlude where the audio goes funny. Just stick with it. It smooths right back out. So without further ado, I give you the one and only Joseph Gifford. Joe, welcome to the show. I am so happy to finally have you on here. Welcome.
Thanks, Morgan. I'm happy too. There are two of us happy.
I think we can just dive right in. I wanted to ask, can you start by saying a little bit about how you came to start practicing meditation. When and how did you start? What was the catalyst?
It was very simple, Morgan. I read a newspaper article about transcendental meditation. That was in 1973, long time ago. I was 53 years old. I'm 95 now. And it promised stress release, all kinds of good things. I'd been in psychotherapy for a long time. I had depression problems. Even though I was very creative, deeply creative, there were still some problems. And I thought the years of therapy were okay, but not enough. And I said, I'm going to try this thing called TM. The center was just 2 blocks from where I lived in Cambridge, Mass. I was initiated on a Saturday. And the next day, Sunday morning, I did my meditation. I had my breakfast, and I couldn't move for like 5 hours. And I realized I had built up so much stress. It was like a dirty bathtub with all the water going out. And that was how I learned TM, just a simple beginning.
Wow, for real? You sat for 5 hours?
No, I just couldn't. I was exhausted. Let's put it that way. I was exhausted. No,
yes.
Not sitting. I was exhausted for 5 hours, absolutely exhausted. And I realized that I'd built up so much stress, unrealized stress. I didn't realize I had so much stuff inside of my nervous system. So that's how I got started.
So you started in 73,
Yep.
And you started with transcendental meditation. When you started, did you notice benefits and effects pretty quickly from doing the practice?
Morgan, it was astounding, day by day, week by week. And my friends kept saying to me, "You're different, Joe. You're different. You're softer. You're easier. You're just different." And within a year, I went back to the center and I said, "What's involved in these weekend residence courses?" And I went up to my first resident course up in Orono, Maine. I'll never forget it. For a long weekend, twice as much meditation, seeing movies of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, the great guru. And I knew that this is the path I wanted to take. And I took all 7 levels over the coming years. From 73, and I think I got my 7th degree, the flying technique, in about 78, 79.
What was it like? So, for example, when you said your friends started to see the difference in you right away, what was it?
Well, I didn't ask, tell me how different I am. I just knew that my relationship to life, including people, was different. If I saw a red flower, a red rose, the red was deeper. My ego wasn't so much in the way. Let's put it that way. I was seeing the world more as it really was, even though I later found out I had many years to go before I could eclipse that ego, before I could banish it and see the world as it truly was. But still, I was on the way. I was on the path.
Okay, so you've been meditating since 1973.
And
which is fantastic. It's so important for people to hear that, our audience, those of you who are listening right now, because you still meditate now. It's something that's been a life really since you started. It's been a consistent practice, and I can say that I know you. We've been through quite a bit together. We've been on retreats together. Can you talk to us, Joe, a little bit about how has your relationship to meditation evolved over the last 40 years? How has it developed? Also, from Maharishi Mahesh Yogi into the present moment, who have been your influences? And I'd love to hear more about that.
I think there have been 3 influences in my life. The first was Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. And then in about 1982, I heard about a technique called the Reiki. It's now called, I've been with a group for many, many years, and the name was changed to the Radiance Technique, Authentic Reiki. And that was a very transforming technique. It wasn't a meditative technique, but it was a technique whereby your vibration, your personal vibration, is lifted to a much, much higher level. And it has a very transforming effect upon your system, on your being, your physical being, Yes, and your spiritual being. I've been
Mm-hmm.
practicing that every morning since 1982. I became a teacher in 85, and I still do it once in a while. Then along came Andrew Cohen. That was another great teacher for me. I stopped practicing TM with the mantra. I went to his meditation, which is without a mantra, just sitting in silence with the awareness that we're already free. There's nothing, no place to go if you're already free, which is an extraordinary vision of life. And so those were three influences. Yes.
During that time, can you say a little bit about how you've seen the influence of meditation in your life change? How has it deepened? How has it shifted over the years?
Well, it's been extraordinary. Last year, I work with conductors now, orchestra conductors, and I gave a workshop up in Nashua, New Hampshire for the fifth successive year. And I drove back with my assistant, David, and I said, gee, I was in a very powerful place all those 5 days. He says, yes, yes, Joe. It seemed as if you were teaching, as if you were meditating at the same time. And I came home and I was by myself for a week. And I thought, I'm in a very profound place of inner peace. And somehow nothing can change that. That place is like forever. That place is a place of being rooted, non-bendable, like a forever timeless place. And it was an extraordinary week for me to be aware of that last year. So that's the ultimate for me, where I used to be fearful of death like almost everybody, and there's no fear in here anymore. There's just that forever and everness, a place of emptiness in a way. I think that when I meditate, I know that when I go to meditate to that kind of quiet, deep, profound place, it's a place of nothingness, but I've realized that that's a place of everythingness. I didn't know this at first as I began to meditate. I just knew that it was a big stress buster for me, as TM promised that you would get rid of lots of your stress. But that's like the tip of the iceberg. Of course, stress is a beastly thing. We don't want any of that because it clouds our perceptions. We don't see as clearly or hear. We can't open our hearts and love deeply enough when we're involved with stress, which is a tightening of all the perceptions and of your heart. That's part of the journey. But then I began to realize there's a deeper place to go, deeper space to go. As I said earlier, a place of nothingness, but somehow there's this depth of everythingness, of clarity. Yeah, I love the word clarity, where you see the world as it really is and not you wanting it to be this way. Oh, I like that, what I just said. You see the world as it really is, not the way you want it to be.
I wanted to just back up for a sec, Joe. Did you say, because only for a minute the mic became a little fuzzy, but did you say earlier that you used to fear death, but you don't anymore? I couldn't hear it because
that's phenomenal, Morgan. Yeah, all my life.
Yeah, can you just speak to that a little more?
Yeah, sure. I think it's a part of our existence. If you like life, if you love life, if you have family, if you have friends, if you love your work, as I do, you want to keep doing it. You want to keep living life as you have been, and you don't want to leave that life. But I've come to be aware of a phenomenal change. I'm not fearful anymore of leaving my body. I'm not fearful of leaving this life. I can't explain it more than that. I also have a sense of timelessness now, that we're all aware of time so much, as we watch our clocks and so forth. But there's something beyond time. There's beyond the temporal. There's a sense of our being going on forever, ever. That's how I feel it these days, how I feel one's existence, at least my existence. Does that clarify things?
Very much. Would you say meditation has been one of the primary channels for the development of what you're describing, this sense of deeper unity or communion or timelessness.
Yes, a sense of oneness. Oneness with all is what I call it. Yes, it's obvious that after all these years, I'm still doing it. I meditated again this morning in my favorite little place in my living room. It's obvious that meditation has been a very important part of my journey toward freedom, my journey toward a greater sense of the grandeur of life. Oh, absolutely. I would never, never give up my meditation. It's been a very important dimension in what I do, what I have been doing and still do. Yes, absolutely.
Joe, you mentioned that part of your current work is you work with conductors. And I know in the past, you've trained actors, dancers, and performers of many stripes, but primarily now conductors. Can you speak about how you feel that your meditation practice infuses or in any way colors your work with conductors?
Yes, Morgan, I used the word clarity before. And I like that word. I like what it means. Seeing what you see, the object in front of you with more clarity. You're not attached to it. It's separate from you. That sounds cold, but it allows you to see more deeply into the object, and the object being at the time being a conductor. I had a lesson last week with my assistant, and what a great lesson that was. We both went to a new place. It allows me to keep going to a new place all the time as I work with conductors. I've been a recent guest teaching the actors at Boston University, the freshmen a few months ago, and probably a few times here and there in the coming academic year. And it's the same with the actors. You talk to them about important things in their lives. You talk to them about, with the actors anyway, how many of you need approval? All the hands go up. How do you develop self-confidence, self-trust? How do you do that? And so forth. You set up questions. Going back to the conductors, the body is the vessel through which you move, through which you make music. And I always start with tension. And I always recommend, I don't push, I don't pull, but I recommend lightly that each one of them learns to meditate. So it allows me to kind of see things in a new way every time I teach. I'm writing a book on my teaching now, 30 years of teaching, working with conductors. And I wrote just a few weeks ago a very interesting little essay about not being too knowing. Now, what does that mean, not being too knowing? There's a fine line between using your past experience to illuminate what you're doing, what you're creating. We're talking about the creative imagination, about making music, painting, writing, literature, whatever. So how do you come to a place of not knowing? There's a fine line between letting go of your past experience and being too knowing and going to that space of not knowingness. It's a matter of coming to a place in your life where you come to a place of innocence, like a young child, where your experience is unknown. It's ahead of you, but it's non-predictable. That's been an extraordinary adventure for me, a experience of not knowing what's around the corner, of not knowing. And I always, when I teach, you're asking about how I work with conductors, I bring this up all the time, how you come to the podium, even though you have this great score, let's say Beethoven Fifth Symphony in front of you, you come to it as if it's for the first time. So how do you recreate yourself?
Yeah.
How do you come to that place of life, walking down the street, Morgan, as if it's for the first time? And I think that meditation is a very strong tool for coming to this place of what I call non-knowingness.
I think that's lovely. And how do you find that the conductors respond to this?
Some run away. Some don't stay with me. It's too much of a challenge, Morgan. And some say, yes, I want more of this. I feel more freedom. I'm getting more depth in my music making. I'm losing. So many conductors do too much. And I bring a kind of Zen-like approach to their work where they do less. If you go to my website, the home page says very strongly, in less is more. And I feel that's a very important principle in life. And I think, meditation is a good avenue for that, coming to that place of silence and depth, that less is more is there, not more is more, never more is more. That's our society these days. Got to do it. Got to do a lot of it. You got to prove yourself and so forth and so on. But meditation is a place of silence, profound, a depth of finding something way beyond your normal place in life. Yeah.
I have another question.
Sure.
You often use the word seamlessness in relationship to life and music and conducting. What do you mean by the word seamlessness, and why is it important?
Morgan, if you find my voice changing, it's because there are tears coming into my eyes now. Because what seamlessness means to me is that there's a profound pulsing energy that moves through the world and through you and me and through all beings, through nature, through the trees, through the dogs in the street near me here. A pulsating energy, a transcending energy that moves through all of this. If you know that, you allow that to move through all of your experiences, no matter all. We all have bumps in the road. God knows. Our dear ones pass away. Our wives and husbands, our partners, our dear friends pass away, and you're still here. And then you feel this ongoing, everlasting, non-changing, seamless, pulsating, transcending energy that moves through all of our experience, all of it. That's what I mean by living with the quality of seamlessness, being aware of this universal, that's another word, this universal aspect of life, which is ongoing, never changing. We change, but this pulsating energy never changes. You go back to Beethoven, Mozart, and this God-given energy moving through the centuries, through space and time to us. I went with my partner some years ago to the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg. We walked into the room where the Rembrandts were. Marvelous painter, fantastic portraits. And it was like an illumination going on. Here, 400 years later, there is this pulsating light. That's another word, light, moving through from Rembrandt, from his palette, from his paintings, to us coming into that room. So that's a window, a portal into what I mean by living with an awareness of the quality of the seamlessness of life.
I have a follow-up question to that, Joe.
Yeah?
Can you speak about stillness for a little bit? When you speak about stillness, or you write about stillness, as you practice it, as you experience it, what are you talking about? Because there's obviously, just as with the word seamlessness, when you talk about stillness, we're not just talking about sitting still. There's a deeper quality to it, and I wondered if you could speak to that.
Yeah, well, let me start from a very practical viewpoint in answering to your question. So many of us have habitual patterns of behavior, speaking a certain way, moving a certain way, which we repeat. And often there's tension tied into these habitual patterns of behavior. If we become aware of these tension habits, vocal, moving, behaving, responding to people, to things, we begin to leave behind our past, and we step into a newness. The journey is not easy, and it takes a long time. I've worked with my students for many years. This is one way of coming to a newness, to freedom, that if you begin to let go of the body is a vessel of our past. The body is the vessel of our past. And if we begin to let go of those tensions, those past tension experiences, the ego, of course, is involved in this, deeply involved. It's intertwined with tension. So we come to newness, as I was saying a while ago. We come to newness and we begin to let go of the busyness in our lives. You come to a place of kind of an inner stillness which begins to feel like more inner peace, and that translates into outer stillness, outer peace, and stillness has a profound quality of seamlessness. I go back to seamlessness. Yes, that's good. You become aware of that quality of transcendental energy moving through you. When you're busy, you become cloudy. Your perceptions become cloudy. But when you meditate and come to that place of quiet, deep nothingness, then you let go of the past. You let go of the busyness. You let go of the me, the I, and you go to the other, to other people. Your heart opens up much more. And you come to that place of more inner quiet, more inner stillness. And as I said, that translates into more of a sense of outer stillness. There's a sense of purity about it. It's like a seed. It's a natural place to be. That's also good. You come to your who you truly are in nature, and you're part of nature. Hi, Morgan.
So, Joe, you have a quote I'd like to read. You say, and I quote, "The poet in the conductor knows that inherent in music, as in all of nature and life, there is an abiding silence. Silence, ungraspable through the mind. Silence, which comes to be experienced and recognized when we enter that mysterious realm beyond space and time, beyond our past experience, into the unknown." End quote. While you were just talking, it reminded me of this quote, and I wanted to ask if you could say more about this, speak to the relationship between this silence and movement and the transmission of that deep inner stillness or silence we discover and connect with during meditation, how that comes out into our lives.
When we meet other people, knowingly or unknowingly, we see them, we hear them, we feel them, because who they are in terms of what their vibration is, what their resonance is. We talk about being attracted to charismatic people. There's more light there. There's more resonance. But with that comes a kind of quiet, abiding stillness and also silence. I spent quite a while putting down those words that you just quoted because, boy, how do you describe silence? That's very difficult. So I'm trying to bring it into kind of our real life now. So there's something which I call the law of resonance. You go from density to light. With density, people who are depressed, illness is dense, unhappiness is dense, but goodwill, joy, even ecstasy, the knowledge that life is really marvelous. And you go toward that place we can call light, where there's a high vibration, a high resonance. And that's where you find lots of a deep silence coming through. It's very subtle. It's there. It's pervasive. It's abiding, but it's there. It's hard to talk about, Morgan, this thing called silence. You have to experience it. Again, it's beyond the mind. You can't find it through your mental process. It goes beyond the mind. The mind is very fickle. The mind sometimes clouds our perceptions, our deeper awarenesses. There's a deeper place beyond the mind within each one of us.
When you go to the opera, would you say that, like, because I know sometimes when I'm very moved by a piece of music and something really touches me in the heart, often I am left in a very deep place of just silence, fullness.
Yeah.
And there are no words. I'm resting in this very deep place. And I loved that word you used, resonating, because I think that describes, it's one of those qualities in the silence where there's an abiding resonance in life. I wonder, do you, when you go to the orchestra, is that something that's part of your experience, this silence when you're listening to the music? Is that something that you are hearing or that you are tuned into?
I was talking about this just recently to a friend. I go to the theater quite a bit. I'm going to the theater Saturday night. I go to the orchestra, to Boston Symphony, about 12 times a year. It's a lot. I go to the opera here. I go to the ballet a lot. I was a former dancer. And I was saying that when I go to any of these performing events, I want to be touched, deeply touched by the universal coming through on the stage, on the orchestra stage, the opera stage, whatever. If the creator of the music or the theater, even a great movie, if I'm touched by the universal coming through, something greater than sitting in a chair and watching and walking down the street, something greater than that, I want to be moved. I want to leave that hall changed by what I've experienced. And yes, there is an abiding silence moving through this. I went to Symphony Hall last year. I was quite early, and I sat up in my usual seat in the first balcony there. There was nobody around, and tears came to my eyes because I felt how much being here had meant to me over the years past. How much I'd gained of this glorious experience of great music. Does that help?
Yeah, you can't see, but I'm nodding. So, Joe, after 95 years of life, what would you, ooh la la, indeed, what would you say are some of the secrets to a long and happy life? I know that's a completely cliche question, but
yes, it is.
It is, and I have to ask it.
It's gradually finding lots of self-trust in oneself, knowing that you're not perfect, going on and on. Never predicting what's going to happen, as I referred to that earlier in our talk together. And letting go of where you've been. That seems paradoxical, probably. Getting to learn things that get in your way and taking risks, trying to find new places to go. So many people get content and just sitting, achieving so much. I've had lots of students over the years, Morgan, achieve so much, and they wrap a little ribbon around their package, and they say, good, I have it, it's nice. And that's not healthy. You always want to know more. What's around the corner? I want to know more of what I don't know. And my partner was a great scientist. He was always searching for what he didn't know. I've been looking back at myself over my many years. I look back now and with humility say to you that I've also been a searcher, seeking what I don't know, always coming to a deeper creative place of fulfillment, which means filled with fullness. Not happy with just the word nice. Nice isn't enough. Ecstasy is better. And living a life to the fullest.
I love the word ecstasy because if you break it down, it means stasis, moving out from being static.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I love that. I love that.
I love it too.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. And there also, just to even speak more directly to some of our listeners about meditation, a lot of them may be new to meditation or early on the path of meditation. What words of advice or tips would you have for folks who are just starting to meditate?
Well, I think I hear many people saying, I can't meditate. My mind is too strong. But to know that the mind is a thinking machine, it's always going to be there. And you don't knock it around. You don't push it around and say, go away, mind. You just let it be there. The sun is always inside. And the clouds may come over and cover the sun. The clouds may be the mind. Let the clouds come and go. Never mind the clouds and the mind. The sun is deeply within. It's there all the time. It's abiding. And just be aware of that. Trust that sun inside. And another important thing is, I had to learn this when I was a young meditator. If you've had a peaceful, although I'd like to say there's no good or bad meditation, although if you've had a kind of a peaceful, very quiet meditation one day, don't try to recreate it the next day. Just go to a new place. Every time you meditate it, let it be as if it were for the first time. As you sit, it's as if you're doing it for the first time. You don't try to go back to what you did the day before to recreate that. Every time you sit, it's as if it's being for the first time. And that should be a metaphor, as far as I'm concerned, for as you go from moment to moment, from day to day in your life. It's like the first time.
I think it's a perfect place to end. And Joe, if people want to be in touch with you, if they want to learn more about your work, I'd like to include some links in the show notes. How can they get in touch with you? How can they learn more about what you're up to?
Well, I have a very fine, handsome, very handsome website, Morgan. It's www.josephgifford.com. That's one place to go.
Okay, great.
And then there was a documentary made of my life about 3 years ago. It's called The Legacy of Joseph Gifford. And there's a very sweet, very short little movie trailer on YouTube. Again, it's called The Legacy of Joseph Gifford.
Everyone, I'm going to include links to Joe's website and also to that YouTube trailer. And I can tell you, I've seen the movie. It is very poignant. It's very moving. It was wonderfully done by a friend of ours, Jill Uchiyama. So I recommend everyone see it. Joe, is it possible for people to see the film?
Jill is in the process of putting it in Vimeo. And if you can go to Jill Uchiyama, UCHIYAMA at Gmail, Jill Uchiyama at gmail.com, get in touch with her. And she's in the process of putting it on Vimeo now. And you'll be able to sign in on it for a few bucks. If you want to buy it for a few more bucks, whatever, I'm not sure. It's a bargain. And be in touch with Jill Uchiyama, and she'll alert you as to how you can get hold of it.
That's great.
We're having our first film festival next month in New York City. And Jill can tell you about that too if you live in New York.
Congratulations, Joe. That's awesome.
That's great.
Everyone, I'm going to include also the link then to Jill's website and her email address. So you can, if you want to see the film, you can be in touch with her directly. Again, if you enjoyed our conversation today, you'll love this movie. It's beautiful. It is really a beautiful piece of art. Joe, thank you so much for coming on the show. I love talking with you, and I think our audience is going to get a lot out of this. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Morgan. I had a ball. I really had a great time. Thanks a lot.
So I hope you enjoyed this interview with Joe Gifford. If you'd like to contact Joe, learn more about his work, or watch the short movie about his life, I've included links in the show notes of this episode. Head on over to www.onemind.com to find those links. That's www.onemind.com. And if you enjoyed this episode of the OneMind Podcast, why not leave me a rating and a review? Let me know how I'm doing. I love to read your reviews, and I do read every single one of them. You can leave me a rating and review over at iTunes. Also, this show was sponsored by our free How to Meditate mini course. You can learn meditation in 5 easy lessons and sign up over at aboutmeditation.com. And finally, I like to end with a quote. This one is from the famous yogi Paramahansa Yogananda. He says, "Live quietly in the moment and see the beauty all before you. The future will take care of itself."